The Welsh have not been rolling out their vaccine as quickly as possible. The explanation from the First Minister is that they didn't want to use up all their vaccine and then leave their staff standing around. I got it out eventually. That's the lack of sleep speaking. Let's talk to Andrew RT Davies, who's the Shadow Health Minister for Wales. He's former leader of the Welsh Conservative Party as well. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning,
sure,
Julia.
You could have explained that a lot better than me. I got very garbled there. Apologies for that, everybody listening. Do put your radios back on. But this was an astonishing revelation from Mark Drakeford. And when I saw the tweets about it, because obviously I'm on air, I'm not listening to Radio 4, I've got better taste. I thought, oh, come on, people must have twisted his words. But they really didn't, did they? He genuinely has not been rolling out the vaccine so that staff have got something to do.
Well, this is a good news story, or should be a good news story. You know, what UK as a whole is ahead of everyone else in the world when it comes to vaccinations. But sadly, the Welsh Labour Government, and it's not the Welsh that are bad at rolling out the vaccine, it's the Welsh Labour Government that is bad at rolling out the vaccine because of the comments that was highlighted by Mark Drakeford yesterday, that they are actually sitting on vaccine, leaving it on the shelf rather than in people's arms because they're worried that vaccinators might run out of vaccine. Now, I'm not sure whether he's woken up and smelled the coffee, but the vaccine is no good left in the bottle. It needs to be in people's arms and protecting them against the virus.
It doesn't work then. I finally got his quotes, having looked at the wrong ones. He said there will be no point, and certainly it would be logistically very damaging to try to use all of that, meaning the Pfizer vaccine supply, in the first week, and then to have all our vaccinators standing around with nothing to do for another month. The sensible thing to do is to use the vaccine you've got over the period that you've got it so that your system can absorb it, they can go on working. This is not just crazy. This is bureaucracy speaking rather than people trying to save lives. This is criminally dangerous, is it not? Vaccines don't have any efficacy. They don't work at all if they're not in someone's arm. And the fact that these vaccines could be starting to work 2 weeks earlier by putting in someone's arm than Mark Drakeford is rolling out, that will actually lead to people dying.
Well, that in its ultimate worst case scenario is correct, because if people aren't vaccinated, and we know what the ultimate consequence of this virus is, that it's death, regrettably. So if you don't get the vaccine into people's arms, then people will die. But it does seem as if it's official policy to ration the supply of the vaccine in Wales by the Welsh Labour Government because they're frightened that vaccinators might not have enough supply to keep them going.
Give them a book. Give them a book. Give them Wi-Fi so they can watch Netflix. This is an extraordinary revelation. What's been the reaction in Wales? Not as a political partisan point, but just sort of, have people just been absolutely outraged, up in arms about this, or have people sort of shrugged and carried on?
Well, that's the thing. Everyone that wouldn't normally buy into politics is talking about this particular issue in Wales because it's so simple to understand. You know, you have a bottle of vaccine with supply in it. It's sitting on a shelf. It's not making its way to the vaccinators to be injected into the individual who's turned up to be vaccinated. It's a relatively simple process. Everyone can get their head around it. And by official sanction now, we know that vaccine is staying on the shelf because it has been rationed. And what's really galling is when you're looking at social media, you're looking at Keir Starmer, leader of UK Labour, extolling the virtues of vaccination and saying we need to get more vaccines out, yet his most senior colleague here in Wales, the leader of Welsh Labour who are in government here in Wales, has actually got a policy of restraining the supply to help us fight the virus. For goodness sake, the large swathes of the economy are moribund they are. We regrettably have the highest mortality rate of any part of the United Kingdom here in Wales, and yet we've got a government where it's official policy to constrain the supply of vaccine to try and fight this horrendous virus that we've had to be dealing with.
Have you seen, because I've been looking for it and not seen, any criticism by Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader across the UK, to say, sort it out, Mark Drakeford?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that the naughty relative in Wales has been embarrassing the leader in London, if you like. And I think that's the mentality that Keir Starmer has. And so he thinks it's better not to speak about what's going on here in Wales. But I do draw people's attention who live in England to look at what's going on in Wales and see what sort of mess Keir Starmer would make if he was Prime Minister. Now, as I said, this should have been a positive news story, the vaccination programme, because it is a positive news story. But over the last couple of weeks, we've seen drift and delay delay in it here in Wales, where we found out early on that they were actually constraining supply and leaving it on the shelf. Then we got the comments from the First Minister that this isn't a sprint. Well, by God, it is a sprint.
Yes.
And yesterday we had it confirmed again on Radio 4, as you've highlighted today, Julia, that, they're actually stopping supply getting to vaccinators because they don't want the vaccinators standing around doing nothing. Yeah. Well, I'd much prefer the vaccinators standing around for a couple of days doing nothing and more vaccination in people's arms rather than just stuck on shelves.
And we have got this issue, and this is across the UK, that there are vaccination black spots, areas which have not rolled out. And then there was some talk early on that they were going to make sure, over 80s, and this is on the front page of the Times today, jabs diverted to over 80s and vaccination black spots, to make sure that over 80s who are the most at risk do actually get the vaccination. But again, that is going to be stopping the rollout to other areas which have been more efficient. Now, I can absolutely understand that over 80s are our number one priority there as the highest risk of death. I mean, it's a massive big jump at that point in terms of risk of death. But it is extraordinary that we're almost seeing, everyone having to go to the lowest common denominator of capability of rollout. And we really need to, local authorities need to be named and shamed and congratulated when they do well, named and shamed when they do badly.
Well,
held to account.
And that's what's happening here in Wales, is that these numbers are finally starting to draw attention to Welsh Labour's woeful handling of the pandemic. But what's really important here is the lack of ability for them to come forward and give us some positive news. Only last week, when the UK government was in a position to say how many over 80s were being vaccinated, time and time again, the Health Minister and the First Minister were asked the same question in Wales. And indeed, the Director General of the Health Service here in Wales was asked the question at a live press conference, and none of them could provide the answer. Yeah. Well, if you don't know how things are going on the ground, any general or anyone running an operation will tell you this. How on earth can you keep the show on the road?
Yeah.
Because ultimately you don't realise how well the battle, and this is a battle against the enemy, the virus, is going, and you know where to deploy your resources and your reinforcements.
Indeed.
And it is highly regrettable that we have such inertia at the top of the Welsh Labour Government, but it's a salutary lesson for anyone else in the UK who thinks that, Keir Starmer would be any more competent.
I mean, I'd like to think Keir Starmer would be more confident than Mark Drakeford, but I mean, at least we can give him that credit. But there we are.